Hello, Adam's child. Welcome to this week's sermon, a very special sermon where through sound, sight, and mind, we encounter that which is best left alone. Join me in looking at the unexplainable powers, beings, and mysteries that are the Paranormal of Fallout. Crank up the rads and come with me as we enter the Rad Zone. We start with the first door, behind which resides exceptional powers of soothsaying, mental domination, and unexplainable powers. Also, check out my second channel and see if you like it. Okay, back to the spooky. Uncommonly found in post-war America is a small and unstable group of people with various mind powers called Psykers. Psykers are the name given to a type of person that exhibits psychic, psychokinetic, or other such powers that they control with their mind that are often tied to a powerful but understandable technology called the Forced Evolutionary Virus. The most well-known being with hostile psychic powers is the Master, an incredibly intelligent and powerful being that is comprised of multiple individuals and a computer system.
Or do you die here?
Join.
Die!
Join.
Die!
Although the Master had a relatively humble start, he was a normal man named Richard Gray who stumbled upon a military base that had a large quantity of the highly mutagenic FEV. Richard and his friend Harold would explore the facility before Richard was knocked into a vat of FEV and his friend Harold fell unconscious. Richard would come to at some point and found that FEV had actually greatly expanded his intellect, and he was intrigued. He began experiments with FEV. He exposed animals to it, which resulted in a number of horrific mutated creatures, and started an incessant push to develop the perfect specimen to inherit the destroyed and irradiated world. Super mutants would arise from this avenue of experimentation, large, strong, and immune to radiation. Richard would continue experimenting on himself and other victims to discover everything FEV was capable of. Self-experimentation with targeted FEV injections gave Richard the ability to interface with computers and gain all new powers. Richard, now an unrecognizable mass of organic matter, other people he had absorbed, and computers, gave himself a new name to match his new life: the Master. The Master found he was able to read, influence, deceive, and even harm the minds of the super mutants under his control, as well as normal humans, like a cult called the Children of the Cathedral who joined his cause. Such was the Master's abilities that the final hallway that leads directly to him, called the Corridor of Revulsion, is so psychically charged by the Master that all those that wish to pass through unharmed must wear a device called a psychic nullifier. These psychic abilities fascinated the Master, and he experimented with a number of humans to try and expand and understand these abilities bestowed by FEV. 4 of his experiments are locked away in cells in his underground vault, and they successfully exhibit a number of psychic abilities, but at a terrible cost. All of his Psykers are completely insane, although to varying degrees, and they exhibit a range of psychic powers. All of them are equipped with psychic nullifiers to help contain their powers, with one of the less insane ones named Wiggum having psychoelectric powers. He is able to generate and emanate dangerous amounts of electricity. Even the nullifiers don't negate these powers, as sparks of electricity flow over his body. Gideon is the most lucid of the Psykers and has a mixture of telepathy, being able to transmit and receive thoughts, and photokinetic abilities, able to produce and manipulate light, which seems to emanate from his hands. Gideon is fiercely loyal to the Master and his cause, although he and all other Psykers are deemed failed experiments by their Master, owing to their instability and therefore uselessness. Moore is the least comprehensible of the Psykers, who is described as having a strange energy flare from his eyes, and he is pyrokinetic, able to produce fire at will. Lucy is the last and is the only female Psyker, being telekinetic dominant, while also exhibiting photokinetic abilities with her head glowing with energy. The fate of the Psykers are tied to the Master, either through loyalty or an inability to comprehend their awful situation, and all of them, the Master included, are fated to die, burying their secrets. Although fire and electricity wielding powers haven't been seen since the Master's last failed experiments, there is a more common power of seeing the past, present, or future. Residing in the deserts of the Mojave, a lone boy named Clay, who prefers the moniker the Forecaster, has the ability to speak with his deceased parents and some sort of ability to look into the future, to see things that are hidden in the present, or to speak of things that happened in the past that he didn't experience himself. Although he is just a boy, when he sees and speaks using his powers, he will speak cryptically, all except for when speaking of the past.
All lose in different ways. A dam of corpses, towns of corpses, scattered across the sand. But whose? In what shares? Even the dealer doesn't know. Forecast, a rain of blood will flood the desert and not purify it.
Is this really much of a forecast? He quite literally says that no one knows what's going to happen, except the Legion and the NCR will fight, and House has his own plans. I guess that's not a bad prediction for a 12-year-old. It's hard to get any useful information from him even after paying 100 caps for 3 separate fortunes, and he himself admits that living near the 188 trading post means he hears and sees a lot of different things, which may be what is informing his strange forecasts. However, thinking, as he calls his powers, comes at a great cost, and he gets fierce headaches, which is only fixed by wearing a psychic nullifier, the exact same contraptions that curbed the abilities of the Master's Psykers. The Forecaster stands as an anomaly in the Mojave. It is unknown where and how he got a psychic nullifier, or how he even got his gift. On the entire other side of the continent in Boston is an old woman who has formed a strange relationship with addictive, mind-altering chems. Mama Murphy is a member of the Floundering Minutemen, and when under the influence of a chem, is able to see snippets of the future, past, and hidden things in the present she shouldn't know, much like the young Forecaster. She has known about and used her gift throughout her life, even foreseeing the destruction and sacking of her town, Quincy, at the hands of a group of raider-like mercenaries called the Gunners. However, in her advanced age, she recognizes that her body just can't take the trips anymore, and so do her fellow Minutemen who actively try to keep her from using. But she thinks the good that her sight may do is more important than her own health, and so, against all advice, she will keep using in order to provide information that may help or save other people. Helping the player character in their mission to find their kidnapped infant son and the murderer of their spouse is considered one such noble cause, and therefore, Mama Murphy will throw back a jet to help us out. Unlike the Forecaster though, Mama Murphy can reveal tangible, useful information. She can recall a terminal password that can bypass a confrontation with a mob boss and his fling who have taken Detective Valentine captive. Another one reveals the location of keys that will allow the player to enter Conrad Kellogg's house, who is our spouse's killer. Another revelation will decrease the amount of damage that Kellogg will do during our final showdown with him, and the last one can provide a deactivation code for an Institute courser that we need to hunt down in order to reveal the location of the Institute. Mama Murphy's revelations are much less cryptic than the Forecaster's, but she will have difficulty breathing, her heart will beat nearly out of her chest, and she will need to rest for a spell after each revelation. This ultimately results in, upon consuming the 5th chem, Psycho, her dying as everyone feared. Mama Murphy can give very interesting predictions about the fate of the Commonwealth based on who the player decides to support, which is undoubtedly an accurate account of potential futures, because she has a very solid track record. Mama Murphy can be convinced to retire her use of the sight, as she calls it, in order to preserve her life, although it takes a couple difficult speech checks to convince her to do so, and she will spend most of her time in a specially made chair that she insists she must have to rest her old bones before she'll do any fortune telling. Mama Murphy was originally intended to be in a wheelchair, which was changed to a floating Mr. Handy type chair before ultimately the developers had her walk like everyone else. And some early concept art also portrays her as being black. Mama Murphy isn't the only one expanding her mind with the use of chems. Allegedly, the shaman of the village called Arroyo in Fallout 2 does so as well. Hakunin has an important role in the village. He is a healer of the body and the mind and prepares the player character the Chosen One, to go on a quest to find a holy Gek and return to the village. This pre-war technology can indeed turn the terrible famine around, but at first must be found. Hakunin will continue to help the Chosen One on their journey, not by accompanying them, but by appearing and speaking to them in dreams, and in at least 4 dream sequences. Using the spirits of the ancestors, he touches our thoughts to urge us forward in finding the Gek as crops fail and the village dies. He cannot offer helpful information, so it seems his powers are limited to one-way communication only, and he is fated to die when the Enclave find and raid the village, killing many and taking the rest hostage back at their base on the oil rig. In a like manner, another tribal in Fallout 2 known as Sulik claims to often speak with spirits and, in particular, Grampy Bone, the large bone that pierces his septum that is apparently from his grandfather. Those literal connections to his deceased grandfather allow him to purportedly connect to the spirit world and get advice, although none of it is detailed or direct, but sometimes it can be somewhat helpful, like hinting that the Arroyo villagers are somewhere near the ocean after they're abducted. FEV-induced psychic powers and glimpsing the past, future, and hidden present are fairly mundane when it comes to the paranormal happenings in Fallout, but there also exist those that are able to commune with and dominate the many dangerous beasts that prowl the wasteland. Perhaps the most infamous group are the Beast Lords, who can be found in Illinois and Missouri in Fallout Tactics. They dress themselves similar to raiders or tribals in the Fallout series, and they are no stranger to the use of modern weaponry. But that isn't what makes them formidable. Their ability to control and dominate wasteland creatures, forcing them to fight on their behalf, is their most potent weapon. How exactly the Beast Lords acquired this ability is not known. It may have been acquired through radiation, their apparent practice of cannibalism, or something more mysterious down in the caves under Marden, which they claim as their headquarters. Regardless of how they got their unique ability, they can control all manner of giant insects, dogs and wolves, giant rats, Brahmin, Komodo dragons, and rad scorpions. Notably, they are unable to dominate the Deathclaws, possibly because Deathclaws in Fallout Tactics are intelligent enough to speak. This may be the limit of their powers and why they can't control people. Their powers are only effective against lower intelligence beings. In order to make the Deathclaws work for them, they were able to capture the Mother Deathclaw and hold her hostage, forcing her children to help the Beast Lords expand their influence and eat more people, I guess. Their leader, Dar, is a strong opponent and brutal leader, and he appears to be inspired by a character from the Beastmaster movies, which follows a character named Dar who is able to communicate with animals and likely is the inspiration for the whole group. Although Dar is definitely the good guy in the movies, rather than being a cannibal raider. Their fate is to be wiped out by the Brotherhood of Steel, led on a mission by the player character and their fire team, so it is unclear if we will ever reveal the mysteries of the Beast Lords. On the East Coast in the capital wasteland is a peculiar young woman who at one point was named Tanya, but now goes by a whole different name, the Antagonizer. Tanya was the daughter of caravanners who one unfortunate day were attacked by a group of giant ants. All went missing and were presumed dead, and that was nearly the case. Tanya was actually the lone survivor, but this orphan nightmare scenario has a twist. This tragedy was her villain origin story. Tanya could somehow communicate with the ants and began living her life among the colony. Was she born with this ability, or did she acquire it after living with the ants? If she did have it this whole time, why did she only use it to save herself and not the rest of her family? She would go on to live with the ants around Canterbury Commons and would be seen by some inhabitants for fleeting moments living in the city's muddy tunnels. The Antagonizer would don her unique ant-inspired costume and begin speaking and acting like a comic book supervillain after she lost herself in the world of comics, seemingly as an escape from the trauma that she experienced as a child. The Antagonizer was a villain from Hubris Comics, and Tanya latched onto this persona, seeing people as weak and self-destructive, and ants as loyal and constructive, and thus more worthy of surviving in a world that humans destroyed. She seems to have a vendetta against humans and especially those at Canterbury Commons, but she seems focused on two main objectives: expanding her ant colony and eliminating any threats that would prevent that from happening, which, as of the events of Fallout 3, is a man who has taken on the mantle of another supervillain from Huber's Comics called the Mechanist. They will confront one another on their first visit to Canterbury Commons, where they will exchange words in campy, elevated dialogue before having a small battle, or not. It is up to the player character in Fallout 3 to decide who to support in this bitter feud: the robot-obsessed Mechanist or the human-hating orphan, the Antagonizer, either through killing one of them or convincing them to give up their larger-than-life antics. The Antagonizer has a special connection to her armor. She seems to believe it has great significance, and giving it up is to give up the entire mantle and character of the Antagonizer. But that is all it seems to represent. It isn't the source of her ant-controlling powers. It is unknown if the Antagonizer learned how to communicate and command ants, or if she was born with some sort of mutation that allowed her to do so, but an interesting similarity with the Beast Lords is that she is apparently a cannibal, as she can be found with human flesh in her inventory. Is there something about consuming human flesh that makes one closer to mutated wildlife? Decades before either the Beast Lords were known of or the Antagonizer began commanding ants, an unusual being also exhibits powers of psychic control. But rather than a human commanding mutated creatures, it is some sort of creature that is psychically dominating a human. Only known as the Fisherman, just a few decades after the Great War in Fallout 76, he has moved into the Appalachian region by traveling up the Potomac River. The Fisherman is a cloaked and unusual-looking creature, very obviously aquatic but human-like in form and mannerisms, but unable to speak, opting for growls and gurgles. The Fisherman's physical similarities to the Mirelurk Kings in Fallout 3 is undeniable, but that is not the only similarity. The Fisherman has a human companion, or worker, or slave, named Raymond Clark, that shows signs of being controlled. Clark was at one point a boat captain, but now accompanies the Fisherman for reasons he doesn't really know himself, as his mind is often clouded and foggy. Captain Clark was prompted at some point in his travels to leave recorded holotapes because he felt his mind more adrift than ever since traveling through a certain area. Although he is somewhat embarrassed about making such simple recordings, over time it becomes apparent that he had good reason to be worried. Large periods of time passes before he will come to. Entire seasons seem to come and go in a flash, and he has begun to even forget things about himself. In this whirlwind of confusion, he acts robotically with only a single goal: to fish, to get others to fish, and to catch as many strange ones as they can. Trying to speak to Captain Clark in person is largely unhelpful because every time he's about to divulge some interesting or revealing information, he winces in pain and pivots away from what he was about to say, like when he was trying to broadcast on a shortwave radio.
Know that I am in grave danger.
Something is obviously amiss, but Captain Clark is unable to openly acknowledge it, and it would appear that the Fisherman is using the poor old captain as a mouthpiece to speak and interact with humans, as the Fisherman appears unable to. Their only interest seems to be in fishing, which if the player character agrees to help with, they can return with their catches and turn them into fish bits, which are then fed to Linda Lee, the giant hermit crab that the Fisherman and Clark used to travel. Upon feeding Linda Lee, she will spit out a slimy but usable legendary item. Captain Clark will be disappointed if one brings typical fish, but will change his demeanor altogether when he is brought a mutated, corrupted specimen. What the ultimate purpose of the mysterious Fisherman is cannot be known right now, nor why corrupted fish are so coveted, but the Lovecraftian and cosmic horror undertones are present. But that topic will be a much darker door that we will soon cross. We are now entering a deeper door that takes us to a place where the physical world and the world of the dead intersect. In the Mojave is a small graveyard that would be completely nondescript and uninteresting if it weren't where the player character, the courier, had their life ended with 2 shots to the head. Although the courier would make a miraculous recovery, at night can be heard the ghostly whispers of those that were not so fortunate. One may think this may be angry spirits jealous of the courier who was once interred here and cheated death, but these exact whispers can be heard in the cemetery at Camp Forlorn Hope, where many NCR soldiers lie, and the graveyard at Bitter Springs, which holds the remains of those massacred by the NCR. Ghostly whispers are enough to make hair stand up on the back of your neck, but what of actual aberrations? Years before Adam reshaped the world in his image, lived the Grantchester family. The father, Hannibal, and the mother, Morticia, gave birth to a tiny daughter, Lucy, after a difficult pregnancy that nearly killed Morticia. And after the birth, this small family would never be the same. Residing in the impressive and eclectic Grantchester mansion, Lucy would begin to exhibit strange and disturbing behavior. Lucy did not play well with others, and as a result, the only things that would play with her were insects that she would throw into a fire, or small creatures that she would kill and skin, nailing them to the bottom of the furniture. As soon as Lucy could walk, Hannibal and Morticia could not keep staff employed. All were unnerved and frightened of Lucy, with some claiming that she was Satan's spawn. Lucy's parents became convinced that she was possessed, which led to even more drastic measures. Hannibal would beat Lucy in a misguided attempt to free her of the spirits that were said to control her, and when that proved ineffective, they spent copious amounts of money to renovate the mansion. At the advice of a fake psychic, they added chimneys to let out evil spirits, had entire rooms built upside down in order to confuse bad spirits, and even stairs and doors that led to nowhere in an attempt to make it more difficult for the evil spirits to affect them and their daughter. The Grantchesters stopped getting visitors, and their friends avoided them as Lucy's behavior took a toll on her parents, and things only got worse. Lucy began to play dangerous and sometimes deadly tricks on her parents, poisoning supper one evening that partially disabled her father, who would afterward completely rely on a cane for walking. Dolls would be found hanging from their necks that resembled the parents, people would get pushed down the stairs, and Hannibal would even find a rusty spike driven into his shoe, which impaled his foot. Desperately, they relied on seances led by their personal psychic to try and drive the evil spirits from their daughter, but there was an undeniable chill that permeated the house. In one last fit of anger, Hannibal approached Lucy to once again strike her with his cane, but it was the last time he would ever try to do so. Hannibal was found on the ground, dead, impaled by a pair of bloody scissors. Around the same time, her mother was found dead as well, stiff and cold on the floor of her master bedroom, having asphyxiated on a cloth doll shoved into her mouth. The police questioned Lucy, who gave pathetic excuses for both deaths, blaming her mother's death on the doll and her father's death on him tripping and falling onto the scissors. The police did not buy these stories, especially after finding Hannibal with all of his fingers cut off post-mortem, and Lucy was taken to an insane asylum. There, Lucy would live for years until she had turned 18, when she would escape the asylum and make her way where else but the site of her parents' murders, the long-abandoned mansion. Lucy apparently chose to end things then and there, and police would find her body hanging in the attic. But this salacious story was too good to pass up, so the mansion was heavily monetized and turned into a Nuka World adjacent attraction. Crowds came to hear the morbid history of Lucy and her parents and see the rooms where unspeakable atrocities were committed. But 200 years later, after the Great War, the mansion sits relatively quiet, except for one man trying to make the mansion his home, with a little girl gazing down from the top floor to all of those that enter. Running across the loft when we enter the building, running through rooms giving us fleeting glimpses until we reach the top of the house, the attic, the very place where an 18-year-old woman bid farewell to this earth. With only one way up or down, this young girl can be seen running across and through a door that when we go to pursue, a fake door with a dead end. We have been seeing and chasing a specter, Lucy's ghost, that for some reason cannot leave this mansion even after leaving our world for the next. Lucy's appearance isn't unique to us, since Zachariah, the former gunner that has booby-trapped the mansion to claim it as his own, began to hear distant laughing that sounded like a little girl, although he chalked it up to a malfunctioning Assaultron robot. Incredibly, the ghost of a disturbed girl pales in comparison to the encounter that can be seen in Fallout 2. In the crime-ridden settlement called The Den, a woman, Anna Winslow, lived with her family, scraping by with a meager existence. Anna would die and her family would move on, abandoning their old house, but a very important item was left behind, a gold locket that was once owned by Anna. How Anna met her fate is unclear, but years later when a street urchin was living in the abandoned house, he came across this locket tucked away somewhere and kept it for himself. Little did he know that taking the locket awoke a specter from slumber, trapped inside the old house. People from the den swear that the house is haunted, catching glimpses of spirits and hearing an ominous, painful groaning emanating from the house. Indeed, if one waits until midnight in the abandoned home, a ghostly figure of a woman can be seen walking around aimlessly in great distress. Although we can see and hear her lamenting the loss of her locket, exclaiming that she is in great pain, she doesn't seem to see or hear us. Tracking down the locket, which Joey still has even though he is a grown man slinging jet with the rest of the junkies, bringing the locket back and giving it to Anna causes her to exclaim in relief, "Mommy, Daddy, I am coming. Grammy, I can see you. It's so bright." And then rather than disappearing, she collapses into a pile of bones on the ground. While most don't expect a bunch of bones to fall out of a ghost, this is the Rad Zone, and we expect the unexpected. She cannot be truly at peace until we travel to the nearby cemetery and find her grave, where we can inter her remains one final time. However, it begs the question, if she had a grave and has been dead this whole time, presumably she was buried here. Did she and her bones rise from the grave when her locket was stolen? The locket disappears when we give it to her, so was she always trapped on Earth until she was reunited with the locket? How can a ghost take a golden locket into the spirit world, but not her bones? So many questions and absolutely zero answers, although this sad story with a happy ending is capitalized on by a con man called the Great Ananias, who tells us a story of a princess who was poisoned by an evil magician for her amulet, and that is the spirit that haunts the abandoned home, perhaps indicating that Anna was murdered. But he's also a giant liar, so who actually knows? Another door, a darker door, yet another level deep to a place so mysterious, so fraught with evil, that no one has yet uncovered even a fraction of the depravity. Ever since Fallout 3, more and more evidence has been uncovered to reveal the presence of a deep, ancient evil that some powerful pre-war people worshipped, and the dark influence remains through the apocalypse. To not bury the lead, these specific structures, scriptures, and beings are all Lovecraftian in nature, bearing names and visages that highly resemble those found in H.P. Lovecraft's literary work and the cosmic horror cosmos that he created many eons ago, so long that most traces and remnants of this dark world lie buried under dozens of yards and meters below the surface, hidden away from the sight of man and beast, often locked behind thick walls of stone. Monuments to this evil were created, arcane words were written into giant tomes, and human sacrifices were made to worship, honor, and possibly aid strange and unusual beings. In the years and months before the bombs fell, there was a company appropriately carrying the name Dunwich, just like the H.P. Lovecraft novella, The Dunwich Horror. This company developed high-tech acoustic drilling technology, which was highly effective, resulting in a number of lucrative government contracts. The Dunwich Company was not interested in massive profits, though. Money was simply a means to an end, and that end slumbered deep beneath the ground. The Dunwich headquarters building on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. was chosen for a specific reason. The higher-ups were using their special drills to dig deeper and deeper beneath the building, unbeknownst to most of the company, until they found a secret that was better left buried. Once they found it, they gave the bulk of their staff paid time off, praising their diligent work and congratulating all on a successful year, treating them all with an early holiday vacation. This allowed the inner circle at Dunwich to drill and investigate a tall, intimidating obelisk on October 23rd, 2077, the exact day the bombs fell. We don't know everything that happened after they found their prize, but the obelisk is undeniably creepy, sculpted with vines, a womanly figure reaching out in a foreboding pose, and decorated with human skulls, exuding a dark presence. There is a noticeable uptick in radiation, and a spectral voice repeats the names Al-Hazred and Gia. While feral ghouls, many of whom are former Dunwich employees, wander aimlessly. The most recent one to call this place home is a man named Jamie Palabras, who stands worshipping the obelisk, muttering the same names that can be heard whispered by otherworldly voices. Jamie had come to the Dunwich building searching for his father, who had lost his mind after coming into possession of a strange and evil tome. His father's journey into the building was picked up by auto-dictation software, which had been running since the Great War. He was attacked by ghouls on his journey, but was compelled to journey deeper by his unexplainable obsession with the ancient book. He would ghoulify, although he was still being attacked by the feral ghouls that infest the building, because they could sense that he still held the ancient scripture. Eventually, however, the unseen evil fully took hold of Jamie's father, and he became one of them. As he said before, he ominously stated that Oog Qualtoth is returned. It appears as though bringing the tome to the obelisk released a being named Oog Qualtoth, and Jamie's father, after ghoulifying, would spend his time uttering the name over and over again, speaking of the Deep Temple being born and the Deep Temple dying, although it isn't clear what this Deep Temple is, perhaps referring to the area with the obelisk, which is called the Virulent Underchambers. Jamie's journey to find his dad would end much the same for him as it did his father, slipping by and fighting the ghouls to travel deeper and deeper into the building, undergoing sudden visions of the building during the pre-war as he delved even further. Although he found both his father and the tome, eventually the radiation near the obelisk caused him to ghoulify. By the time he can be found in 2277, he is the only non-feral ghoul, although, to be honest, he is about as insane as any feral ghoul, much like his father, Jamie is consumed with repeating the same or similar words.
Sharp knife to send him to Deep Temple. Flay and say my words. Abdul comes again on the Feast of the Weaker, feast for the Deep Temple.
A sharp knife sending someone to the Deep Temple, possibly speaking of human sacrifice, and that someone known as Abdul al-Hazred will come again and be born there in the Virulent Underchambers. It isn't clear who Abdul is or what the connection between him and Oog Qualtoth is. However, in Lovecraftian lore, Abdul al-Hazred is the one who wrote the Necronomicon, a book filled with dark magic, rituals, and history of the Great Old Ones that is meant to help once again fully empower the Lovecraftian gods. Whether the name Abdul references the same Lovecraftian figure is unknown, as it's possible the names don't refer to a specific character. All the way up in Boston, the Dunwich Borers Company was actively excavating yet another side of the occult. Buried dozens of feet under the ground in the middle of an outcrop of marble is something that is valuable enough to the owners of the Dunwich Borers that they dug deep, sacrificing personnel through lax safety standards and constant corner cutting. Multiple workers and even a child or two have fallen to their deaths within the quarry, since management was less concerned about worker safety and more about finding their ultimate prize. They did quarry the marble and sell it, as it acted as a proper front for their secret operation, and it allowed them to dig deeper and deeper. One manager knew of the real purpose of this operation, and he knew they were getting close once strange things started happening. Deep rumbles, unexplainable footsteps, strange electrical and machine malfunctions, and even fleeting visions of a different time. Once management had finally found the secret they had been looking for, they quickly began setting up a plausible alibi to keep the workers from suspecting anything strange. The stand-in crew was convincing to most everyone. However, one manager took his job very seriously and threatened to unravel the web of secrecy and lies, so upper management took drastic action. With one manager in on the conspiracy, Tim Schutz, he lured the other 3 managers to the newly established Station 4 at the deepest end of the tunnel with promises from upper management of an award. But the award was not what Tim expected. All 4 managers would ghoulify, as would many of the poor workers who had just been clocking in and trying to get a paycheck. These ghouls would roam the cavernous quarry halls, their former workplace, now a haunt, until it eventually became their tomb. 200 years after the bombs fell and stopped the aspirations of the Dunwich Borers LLC, the ghouls still roam the depths, and a group of raiders have claimed the old quarry in order to salvage old equipment and metal for the nearby Saugus Ironworks. But whatever ancient evil was uncovered centuries ago is just as potent as ever. The raiders can feel an oppressive presence, and it didn't take long for many of them to consider the quarry haunted. Although raider leadership blamed their workers' lack of progress on them being scared and superstitious, many of them weren't deserting out of fear, they were being ghoulified. Their leader, Bedlam, got so tired of the lack of progress that she went to the deepest parts of the quarry tunnels to set her men straight, only to be reduced to a hostile, blathering mess where she repeats over and over again, "I am safe in the light." A scavenger named Hugo had come to the quarry before any raiders were there and has come under the control of something. In his final moments of life, he recorded his thoughts.
The guys don't bother me anymore. That's good. I think it's... What was that? Can't they read the signs? I think it's time I go back inside the quarry. It's been too long. No, I can't. The guys would never let me in. I could kill them all. No, that wouldn't be what it would want. It's time to lay down. Yes, of course. It's next to my bed. I will. It's loaded.
As the player approaches Hugo's living area called Hugo's Hole, they will hear a solitary gunshot before they reach the end and come upon a still warm Hugo, a man whose mind was consumed by and ultimately ended by an unknown force from within the quarry. Traveling through the quarry, a number of raiders are still there fulfilling their salvage duties, but once deep enough, there are no more raiders, only darkness and ghouls. Each step closer to the end, fighting against swarming ghouls and desperately looking for switches to turn on the lights, we are interrupted by flashes to another time. Pre-war quarry workers are seen working before it disappears just as quickly as it appeared. The lights turn off and the ghouls descend. Near the very end of the quarry is the second and final vision, a solemn gathering of pre-war men and women bowing before a preaching figure with their hands behind their back while he stabs, slices, and flays at an upturned altar with a sharp knife, very reminiscent of Jamie Palabra's words in the Dunwich building. The vision suddenly ends and the 4 pre-war quarry managers will attack, all having ghoulified, including Tim, the one who lured them to the darkest corner of the quarry. In the present day, the sacrificial chamber stands empty, but where the altar once stood is a gaping water-filled hole. Braving the water, darkness, and cramped tunnel, one can swim straight down, revealing the altar which fell and sank in the depths, right beside a great unblinking eye set in a giant metallic face. Passing this unnerving display, continuing to swim parallel to the surface, one will reach the end, the farthest corner of the whole quarry, and likely the most ancient spot of all, but something is amiss. 2 mini-nukes, both very modern devices, are placed decoratively on an altar with one of the few true unique weapons in the entire game, a twisted and wicked-looking blade called Krem's Tooth. This weapon has the sacrificial blade modification which deals poison and bleeding damage truly living up to its bloodletting reputation in the name of ancient evil. Was this blade used by the figure in the vision, the figure that is only named in the game files as the Butcher? Or is it something more ancient? A more natural feature found in eastern Appalachia has been known as Big Maw for generations. A rocky hole in the ground with some water at the bottom, this peculiar hole was used as a place to relax and go for a swim in the pre-war, but even then it had an inexplicable draw. A pre-war note that can be found nearby muses on what exactly caused the maw to open, and then they reveal a compulsion to go inside. They don't even know why. The smell, the sound, the warmth, whatever it is, they yearn to look into the yawning abyss of what they call the true maw. If they do plunge into the maw's abyss as they yearn to, they would find it fairly shallow, but with a long winding skeleton of some ancient leviathan laying at the bottom. Only decades after the Great War, the cult of the Mothman, who revered the holy red-eyed Mothman and other, at this point, unknown beings of the wood, have been drawn to the maw to perform sacrifice. A freshly killed sacrifice lays upon an altar betwixt several cultic idols, while dozens upon dozens of human skeletons are scattered about the maw, and lest there be any confusion about what happens here, a sacrificial blade is also present. The maw, it seems, is hungry, and servants of dark beings will happily feed it. It is possible the maw used to be filled to the top, and many of these skeletons are the remains of those inexplicably drawn into its depths, perishing, although we can't know this for sure. Recently, it has been uncovered that a grotesque mutated version of a fish called a spike snapper, which resembles a mud skipper, can be found and caught in the maw. Black scales, large black spikes, and even multiple red eyes make it appear as some sort of grotesquely corrupted fish that carries a very specific Lovecraftian name, Ril Takanoth, Maw Begotten. It seems what used to be a normal spike snapper has been transformed into this hideous creature through whatever influence emanates from the maw. While there are undoubtedly more ancient ritual sites and deep temples slumbering below the surface of the earth, actual eldritch-like beings have been found. Within the old Lucky Hole mine in Appalachia was uncovered a strange and otherworldly being, long and tree-like, with no discernible body parts, slowly moving its tendrils and strange appendages. The Interloper, as it has come to be called, lies here being worshipped by the same Mothman cult that claimed the Big Maw, although its purpose and origin are completely unknown. Another being, much smaller but with similarities to the Interloper, has been dubbed the Visitor, as it slumbers or perhaps even lies dead deep underground in a location appropriately called the Deep. This one is interesting though, because in the surrounding caverns, strange otherworldly and glowing flora have sprung up, looking more like some alien planet than a cave below the West Virginian soil. Small black ash-like specks rise from the ground before disappearing, and attacking the visitor will cause bloody wounds. The visitor may be related somehow to the strangler vines that choke some parts of Appalachia, since it somewhat resembles them, but we can't be for certain what these entities are, or why they are here just yet. There are a number of beings, particularly in Appalachia, that have many Lovecraftian connections, like the Mothman and the Smiling Man, who don't outwardly share much in common other than being unexplainable and all sharing a very specific trait. They emanate black ethereal particles and smoke like we see in the Deep. But like the rest of the Lovecraftian influences in the game, it's hard to draw any meaningful connections. Of course, certain people and groups can sense the power from these ancient sites and have devoted their lives to worshipping them like the cult of the Mothman, even though their beliefs are quite incoherent. That is not unusual, since as far back as we can dig, the worship of the occult has been a strange melange of beliefs and sometimes fusion with other religions. In the pre-war, one wealthy and powerful family dedicated itself to dark powers, led by the family's matriarch, Constance Blackhall. Through unknown means, but likely leveraging both wealth and influence, Constance came into possession of yet another ancient tome of arcane knowledge. This tome, called the Krivbekni, or Kriv as I will call it, because like most Lovecraftian names they are unnecessarily long and hard to say, empowered Constance. Her life was prolonged through its power, and she was able to build a sizable following amongst the locals, becoming their priestess. Simultaneously, Constance's brother, who was none other than Richard Dunwich, was guiding his company to uncover lost ritual sites deep underground. After the Great War, Richard would disappear, leaving no trail or hint to his fate, and Constance would suffer a fatal blow. The Criv would be stolen from her by an unknown person or persons. The power that had been prolonging her life left with the book, and she rapidly deteriorated and died, her cult falling apart, but she would have a profound influence in her corner of post-war Maryland. Her occult practices fused with local religions and superstitions, leading to the dark, violent rituals of the locals, and perhaps adding to the grotesque deformities seen among them. Whoever it was that stole the Criv, knowledge of its location resurfaced after nearly 200 years from the time it was stolen, and the last remaining black hole was determined to recover it. In a battle of darkness and light, Obadiah Blackhall wants the Criv returned to him for his personal aims, and the Christian missionary named Marcella wants it destroyed. Deep underground yet again is a cavern only known by the mutated locals, lit with torches and winding through long-buried but ancient-looking architecture. Long-buried coffins fall out of some of the walls, and at the end is a chamber with an altar for sacrifice. Human remains, punga fruit, ritualistic dolls, and other small knickknacks are placed on the bloody altar, and right behind it, in a small font with a bloody human skull, is the cursed tome itself, the Krivbekni. Once taken, the swamp folk will swarm in fury to defend their most sacred relic, but the Criv can have two very different fates. It can be returned to Obadiah for a handsome reward, where he will immediately retreat to a secret altar in the basement of his mansion and begin speaking dark phrases before a slain local laying on the altar. Alternatively, returning the tome to the obelisk at the bottom of the Dunwich building will cause it to erupt in flame and disappear, presumably destroying it or at least taking it from this earth where it cannot corrupt or be used for evil any longer. However, some endeavors that aren't overtly Lovecraftian in nature apparently are, as the Red Racer Factory in the Capital Wasteland can attest to. A man only known as the Surgeon, which follows a similar naming convention to the Butcher in Fallout 4, as well as the Fisherman in Fallout 76, is completely consumed with his work, where through a variety of methods, he is determined to find a way to control feral ghouls and super mutants. He has had some success, and within his living quarters and experimental lab, one can hear the same hair-raising voices that can be heard in the virulent underchambers, whispering Al-Hazred and Giyeth. What is the connection here? Will we ever learn how the unsettling beings in Appalachia are connected to the temples, obelisks, and sacrificial chambers that are apparently buried all over the wasteland? What of the ancient writings, Ug Qualtoth, Al-Hazred, and the rampant mutation and corruption that occurs around these worship sites? I don't think we will ever get a definitive answer because the unknowable, incomprehensible horror of Lovecraft is the central theme. But rest assured, or more likely, be warned, that this is not the end at all. So now we cross the final door, one that has no consistency, theme, or explanation. Some connections to ancient civilizations, the occult, aliens, or downright magic. Some things in Fallout don't have reasonable explanations, and the ones through this door are the few that never will. Thousands of years ago, where the scorching sands of Saudi Arabia's Rub al-Khali now stand, an ancient, possibly alien civilization once stood in the legendary city of Ubar. In 1894, a wealthy man and archaeologist set out to find this lost civilization that he and other archaeologists believed to exist. Lorenzo Cabot recorded his incredible journey using a colleague's new invention to try and find this lost city under the sand. Incredibly, not only did the invention work, but after their labor teams worked for weeks, they struck large, stone, handcrafted structures. The first discoveries were fragmentary inscriptions with runes, but this was only the beginning of their troubles. A massive, life-threatening sandstorm suddenly formed and raged for 5 days, keeping all men inside their tents, becoming more anxious and uneasy as each day passed. When the storm finally relented, Lorenzo emerged from his tent to find all of their work had been buried. They had to start all over again. Not to be deterred, Lorenzo had his team dig yet again, and this time the discoveries were earth-shattering. Lorenzo and his team uncovered what they assumed was a crypt, and as Lorenzo lifted the lid on a sarcophagus, the digging team fled out of fear. Lorenzo found a body and a number of artifacts, but one thing caught his eye, and he knew he had to take it. A curious crown of gold and silver, carved with runes, and a green scarab prominently displayed on the forehead. This marvelous work of craftsmanship that did not conform to any known work beckoned Lorenzo to wear it, to place it on his head, and upon doing so, he changed. He was suddenly filled with knowledge, realizing most of his previous assumptions were incorrect. This was not Ubar, and the crown did not come from a crypt, and in a move that surprised everyone, including his colleague, he ordered the recently excavated ruins to be reburied, as he continued to be unwilling to remove the crown. Lorenzo would continue to be radically changed by his powerful and mysterious headpiece, with increasing psychosis, which prompted his family, namely his exceptionally gifted son Jack, to find a way to contain both the crown's power and his father. His father, having committed atrocities due to his psychosis, was put into the Parsons State Insane Asylum. Jack would conduct research on the artifact itself and endeavor to find a method to remove the crown from his father without killing him and thereby curing him. The artifact proved elusive as it clouded Lorenzo's mind with paranoia and psychotic tendencies, while also granting him agelessness and perfect physical health. Jack also recorded telekinetic abilities similar to what some Psykers are capable of, and much of this seems to be the result of an unidentified substance coursing through Lorenzo's blood. Jack was able to isolate this unknown substance and create a serum that, when taken, would grant the same powers of agelessness and perfect health. And Jack would continue to draw his father's blood to make the serum, justifying it by promising his father it was all to try and find a way to finally remove the artifact. Since 1898 up until 2287, when Fallout 4 takes place, Lorenzo has been confined to a small space protected by an abremelin field, a technology made by Jack to dampen the spectrum of frequencies given off by the crown, thereby containing Lorenzo's powers. The name of this field is a reference to a grimoire written in the 18th century that translates to the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abremelin the Mage, about ancient magic in an Abrahamic context. Jack and his family would weather the Great War and somehow still contain his father Lorenzo all the way up into the year 2287, all the while Lorenzo tapped into the knowledge of the Ancient Ones who created the crown and was able to greatly expand his horizons. One fateful day, the facility Lorenzo was contained in was attacked. Raiders savagely attacked the guards, which was a large group of gunners contracted to guard the old insane asylum, and the raiders made it all the way to Lorenzo and are on the verge of freeing him from the abremelin field and locked enclosures when Jack and the player arrive. The player has a choice to help Jack do the unthinkable and kill his father to keep him from escaping with his powers intact, or to free Lorenzo and leave him to take revenge on his entire family. The raiders that attacked the asylum did not do so for any personal reasons. Rather, Lorenzo had been able to reach out past the abremelin field and influence the thoughts of raiders, working them up until they stormed the facility. Lorenzo can use the telekinetic powers of his crown to blow open containment doors, and will also use a force field-like blast from the crown to attack and kill his family. The story of Lorenzo is broadly inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu, where the main character, Francis Thurston, follows a trail that leads to the so-called Nightmare Corpse City called Bria. Interestingly, should Lorenzo be killed, Jack can fashion the artifact into a weapon, utilizing its telekinetic powers with seemingly no detriment. But what of this ancient civilization and this advanced precursor people? Where did they come from? What happened to them? And are they connected at all to the other mysteries of the Fallout world? Among the numerous bizarre, grotesque, and often downright deadly abominations that dot the mountains of Appalachia, there is none quite like the Smiling Man. Dressed in an old-fashioned suit, the Smiling Man gets his well-deserved moniker due to his perpetually smiling face. He speaks strangely, but is more than willing to engage in conversation and even divulge his name, Indrid Cold. Mr. Cold claims to have been away from this area for a long time and that much has changed, but when pressed on what he is doing, he is reluctant to give any details, but will casually speak of some of the more stranger things in Appalachia. The Blue Devil, a ghost, and is quick to tell us to smile, as the whole world will smile with us. Indrid does not have much else to say, and when the small talk has run its course, he will excuse himself to perhaps go find a stranger. Indrid would really just be an oddity in a land of peculiarities if it weren't for one specific ability. If attacked, he will suddenly retreat in a plume of black smoke, just like the Holy Mothman. The Smiling Man is yet another reference to an Appalachian urban legend of the same name, after a report of a smiling man, huddled for warmth in the rain, approached a driver, speaking kindly and saying that he wished for the driver's happiness, after which Mothman sightings began happening. The Smiling Man, if it is indeed a man, reflects these well-known attributes, with at least one similarity to the Mothman. What is his true purpose? Is he just a wanderer as he claims, or is there something more sinister? Given his dress and vocabulary, is he perhaps some sort of time traveler? Only decades after the Great War, New Jersey's Atlantic City has survived the apocalypse, but only just. Several groups vie for power in a city devastated by a flood, as well as a new post-war menace, a human-like sea creature called the Overgrown. Amidst all this chaos, the city tries to be a place where people can spend their caps to gamble or be entertained, scarcely aware of the extremely strange and unexplainable clown-related happenings. In a nondescript shack near the shore is a disturbing scene. A skeleton lies on a bench top with a small clown toy sticking out of his ribcage that looks far too happy to be anything short of sinister, and nearby is an almost sort of shrine with a portrait of a clown, a party hat, and 2 human eyeballs laying in a pool of blood. A strange message is written nearby, "He is seen," with alternating upper and lowercase lettering, and should one take the small clown portrait, they will immediately take damage and have their screen blurred, while a gramophone behind springs to life of its own accord, playing nothing at first, before some carnival-type music kicks in, and distorted clown laughing overtakes the music, lowering in pitch continually, like time itself is slowing down. 2 other strange scenes are found, obviously posed for people to find. One involves 2 mannequins filming with a TV camera, but the female mannequin has several buckets on her head. Removing them reveals a shocking image. 2 more eyes have been plucked from someone's head and driven into the mannequin, and nearby on a desk, another gramophone starts playing the same creepy music. Written in chalk on the desk is the message, "She see," with the same clown toy standing underneath the desk. The last scene has yet another mannequin with some eyes pinned to its head. It is holding an axe with a skeleton beneath it, almost as if it's responsible for the person's death. A message, "He see," is scrawled onto the wall, and taking the axe from the mannequin causes the gramophone to yet again begin its haunting recording, while a clown toy watches from beneath an overturned baby stroller. This would seem to be some elaborate psychological ploy by some sadistic freak, if it weren't for the sudden appearances of life-size clown statues that will begin appearing in far, often high up and inaccessible places. Easy to miss, these clown statues only appear if one interacts with these displays, signifying that something has been released, and it seems to be interested in us. It is difficult to explain these happenings in any logical way, although there is a remote chance these clown displays are somehow connected to the clown performers for the showman faction, who can become hostile towards the player. Even so, why does interacting with normal objects cause us harm, or start a recording, and even more disturbing, have several clowns appear in hard-to-reach areas to watch us? Far north of Atlantic City, at some point before the Great War, a boat was transporting cargo. Although a bit unusual, there was nothing concerning about it, as it was simply a large shipment of mannequins. The trip went from a routine job to a paranoid fear to outright disaster. We are scarcely given any clues, but one note seems to give us a glimpse. Within the water itself, off the coast of Fringe Cove Docks, on the island from Fallout 4's DLC Far Harbor, a torn note reads, "I can't wait to drop these damn mannequins off. The crew is starting to claim that they are hearing weird noises from the cargo. Maybe they're just playing pranks on me? Whatever, we're almost there." However, the boat would never actually reach its destination, because in the murky waters off the island is that very ship. The remains of most or maybe even all of the crew, and one of the mannequins stands over the dead crew as if they know exactly what happened and are responsible for it. How could these mannequins lined along the boat, peering through windows, have caused the boat to sink? How did they get out of the hold? Why is one in a coffin with bars of gold? And how did this all happen so catastrophically that the crew couldn't even escape? Something isn't right with the mannequins in Fallout. We have ventured into the farthest depths of the Rad Zone to see what paranormal mysteries lurk within Fallout, and we have been rewarded. Or have we? Thank you for coming with me on this journey. What is your favorite of these mysteries? Which do you prefer and want to see more of in Fallout, and which of these do you not like? Thank you for being here, and if you like what I do, then do whatever you like to support me in bringing Adam's word to the masses. If you'd like to, you can join Adam's army like these fine folks here on YouTube or Patreon. I would like to welcome new members, and we got a lot again this time, because Adam has truly been merciful. Just Some Dude, Tyson Rupp, Matt Lahuri, Pychek, Jojo Coco, Giub342, Phil S. Malinsky, Luca W., Lil Astro Kid 08, Marshman 427, Django, Brendan LeMay, Chef Random, The Like Button, Matt Storer, Crimson Bolt, Alexander Cooper, Avery Eberline, Phantom Aviator, Jaden, Daniel Bont, Ivo Nation, or Ivo Nation, Patrick P., Christopher Alexander, I Am Igloo, Jared, just Jared, Brian Scott, Dustin Tovey, Simon Griggs, Jeremy Rossman, Dennis Baker, Sean Clark, Mint, Wolfdog122, Pro Frisky, Gotti, Matthew Johnson, Mighty Flumph, Rin F, Dakota Winter, the Tiberium Mutant, Command and Conquer has entered the chat, Rex Machina, Ruben Leagriculture, General Knowledge, Master Saber 89, Jonathan Puckett, Rift Bay X, Red Farth, Alexander Barnes, Ulysses Gonzalez, Mini Pizza, Charles Fail, Jamie, Silas, World of Wrestling, Mod Frost, Anonymous 1337, Artium Hunter, good Metro reference, Emperor Griffin, Ronnie Tabor, Thargs, Dr. Cloak, Tracy Hinman, Shellfishes Miller, Pokey Free, Woke Patrick Bateman, White Fang, Jakob, Casey Punk Must Die, and Emotional Lizard, all on YouTube. Whew. And Phasmatis and Just Jack on Patreon. Adam bless you all. As usual, a special mention of my top tier Alt Adam patrons, Acrid B, Gardner Minshew Simp, Darkle, Tapey Papey, The Breadman, Tyler Eaton, Owen Balzer, and 94, The Love Mummy, Shallow Fire 13, Phantom Inc., Tater Anus, Ibis the Owl, Justin 34, Cherry, Leffelmac, Mo, Gotti, and Anonymous 1337. Atom will reward your faith. Please take care of yourselves. Check out my second channel if you're so inclined. Persevere in Adam's glow, and I will see you soon.